Simon will read the sloka, I'll read the meaning.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'm start.
Yes. Yes, Prabhuji.
Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumagarmam yavanam jara tatha dehantara praptir hira tatra na mu hyati.
Translation.
As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Perpet. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on the account of death, neither for Bhishma or nor for Dorna, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause of lamentation.
Okay, so no cause of lamentation. So Prabhupada's pointing out how the soul is eternal. You give up one body, you take another body. There's no reason to lament. Someone's in the old man's body, like Bhishma and Drona, so if they're going to fall in the battle, they'll get a new body. It's like, just like people want to be rejuvenated. They go for rejuvenation. You want to look young again, right? So, it happens naturally. We all get rejuvenated with the change of body. When we die, we give up the old body, we get a new body. So nothing to lament about. It happens by nature. Of course, people go to so many, they go to many different saunas and different health resorts just to be rejuvenated. But we'll all be rejuvenated naturally by nature's law. Because nature's law is you give up one body, you take a new body. You give up the old body, you take a new body. That's rejuvenation. It's happening naturally. Don't need to spend money to be rejuvenated. It all happens by nature.
Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of an individual soul, the supreme soul and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a datra or a more sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual soul would make the supreme cleverable or changeable against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portion of the supreme exists externally or called kasra, that is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternal so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an internal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the Supreme Soul super soul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflection represents both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental creatures represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed being meaningless. If both of them are diluted by the illusion energy, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be authoritative instructor. Under the circumstance, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is forgetful, soul diluted by Maya.
Okay, so Srila Prabhupada is explaining about the nature of the soul and how the Vaishnava philosophy is different from the impersonal philosophy. The impersonal philosophy, they claim that the soul is, that the soul can be cut off from the Supreme Soul and have to go back and merge with the Supreme Soul. But we say, the soul cannot be cut. That's not the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna clearly said, soul cannot be cut by any weapon. So there's no question of cutting the soul away from the Supreme Soul. But we're eternally individuals. And we have a relationship with the Supreme Soul. There are two kinds of souls. There's the individual soul and there's the Supreme Soul, or the Paramatma, or the Super Soul. So within the heart, there are these two souls. The individual soul is the Jivatma, and the Paramatma is the Supreme Soul. So the Supreme Soul is there like a witness and a friend. He's there guiding us. So we're the living entity, we're the Jiva, and we are described, we're Sanatan, we're eternal, but we're also Shara, we're fallible, which means we can fall under the influence of illusion. We can fall into the material energy, but the Supreme Soul never falls into illusion. The Supreme Soul is infallible. We are fallible, meaning we fall down, but the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Lord, he never falls down. We fall under the power of Maya, but the Supreme Soul never falls under the power of Maya because it's his power, it's his energy. So there's no question of him being illusioned by it. So that's the difference between us and the Lord. He's the master and we're the servant, and that relationship is eternal. The only problem comes is that we forget. We forget that we're the master, we're the servant, he's the master. We fall down. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, 2.14. Jai Shri Mataji, do you want to read?
Matra sparsha
Yes, sure.
kaunteya.
Matra sparsha kaunteya stotsna sukha dukkada agam payeno nitya tam tat tatit kasava bharata. Translation: O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from the sense of perception. O son of Bharata, the one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport: in the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January to February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight in the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friends or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya. Should I continue?
All right, so Prabhupada, this is a well-known verse, very practical instruction, describing about how to be tolerant. And Prabhupada gives two examples of tolerance, which we have in everyday life. In the winter time, taking the bath in the early morning, and in the summer, going into the kitchen and cooking. Both require some tolerance to do these things. In the winter, we don't mind cooking. And in the summer, we don't mind taking a bath. But in the cold weather, it's not so pleasant taking bath. And then the hot season, it's also a lot of trouble to go into the kitchen and cook. But we have to do these things. They're necessary. Can't avoid it. And so the same way, Lord Krishna is giving instruction to Arjuna that in the course of life, there will be happiness and distress. You cannot avoid it. We have to tolerate it. Sometimes we'll be very happy and then feel so good, and other times we'll be lamenting. We just have to go on with life. We have to tolerate these difficulties without being disturbed. That is the point. We should learn to overcome all of these difficulties without being disturbed in mind. So Prabhupada gives the key that knowledge and devotion will help us to steady the mind in these difficult situations. Okay.
The two different names of addresses given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kauteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the manner of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting.
Yeah, so Prabhupada explains the significance of these names, Bharata, Kuntiya, to remind Arjuna of his good birth and the great responsibilities which are on him by taking birth in such a family. So, understanding one's duty is the main point. Huh? We all have some duty, we have some responsibilities. We should not give them up whimsically. Go ahead.
Yahim napyat kyanti ete purusham purashar shaba samadutha sukham kiram somrtavaya kalpate.
Translation. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Purport. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashrama institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order, sannyasa, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyasa order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyasa at the age of 24 and his dependents, young wife as well as his old mother, has no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause, he took sannyasa and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage.
All right, so people, we want to be liberated from material bondage. We have to learn to tolerate difficulties, happiness and distress. So Prabhupada speaks about renouncing, becoming sannyasi, renouncing the world. So to give up these giving up family connections is very difficult for some people, for people in this. Well, it's always difficult for people, but people who are serious about liberation, who really want to free themselves from material life, they will accept these difficulties for the higher purpose. Nowadays, not many people take sannyas. It's very, very rare thing, but still we can renounce giving up the attachment. That is the main thing. We may not be sannyasi externally, but internally we should be detached. In material life, people are often very attached to the family and the home, and our whole life is centered around these things, but we have to understand that this is also temporary. So in the Vedic system, Varnashram was there. That means after family life, there was compulsory retirement. Of course, even today, many countries in the world, people retire. According to the Vedas, one is supposed to retire at the age of 50. And from the age of 50, one should then go and live in the forest and practice austerities. And in this way, prepare to perfect himself. Nowadays, of course, we can't go to the forest. That would be impossible practically, to go to the forest. But what we can do, we can take shelter of things like the Krishna consciousness movement, and go to the temples and be involved there, doing services there in the temple. And this way we become renounced from the family situation. And this way we become qualified for liberation. Liberation means getting free from birth and death. Don't want to come back again, keep taking birth in this world, suffering so much. We want to get free. So liberation, how to get this liberation? We have to cultivate knowledge, we have to become detached. If we get good knowledge, then we'll become more detached from the material situation. So this detachment is really, it's something very important, something which is really required. And we have to cultivate this detachment by hearing properly and then by doing regular spiritual practice, then it will help us to become more detached and to see things, to see the reality of things, to see the temporary nature of the material world, and to understand that beyond this material world, there is an eternal spiritual world. Okay?
Guru Maharaj, but there is no sannyas for women, right, Guru Maharaj?
No, that's why I said women, you know, I spoke about taking sannyas internally. Generally, women don't renounce because women need to be protected. Women should always be protected. But a sannyasi, he has to be fearless and he can go anywhere. He doesn't worry that somebody is not there to protect him. You know, just like Srila Prabhupada went to America at the age of 70 with practically no money and not knowing people. So a woman shouldn't do these things. For a woman to go somewhere not knowing people, then, you know, she may be abused, or she, you know, people may take advantage of her. So women always need to be protected, but they can be renounced, they can be detached, right? So that internal renunciation, that's even more important than the external. Sannyasi should be renounced internally as well as externally. Ordinary people, they may not be able to actually formally accept the sannyas, but internally they can renounce. Internally, they're detached from the material. They're not always just thinking about money and the family and all of these things. I mean, they're not neglectful, but at the same time, you know, they understand the temporary nature of this world. Now, Prabhupada gave the example about Lord Chaitanya, how he took sannyas when he was 24, and he left his elderly mother and a young wife. Now, was this being irresponsible? We have to understand that Lord Chaitanya took the sannyas to set an example, to deliver mankind. If he stayed at home, he could certainly have ensured the deliverance of his wife and mother. But he was thinking more for the welfare of the world than just only, you know, one young lady and one elderly lady, mother and wife. He thought more about the world. And that's why he renounced. That's why he accepted sannyas. To deliver Krishna consciousness to the world. He took a greater responsibility. Now, some people, they want to give up the family life out of irresponsibility. That's very bad. A sannyasi is more responsible. He's not less responsible, but he's more responsible. He's responsible for mankind. He's responsible for the whole society, to deliver them by his example. Is that clear to everyone? Just like in Sri Vaishnavism, we see also Ramanujacharya, he also accepted sannyas, and he also gave up his wife, and he had a mother, of course, also, and he renounced them because he took sannyas. Now, why did he take sannyas? Because it's a higher purpose. That if he stays at home simply in the family life, then he's involved just simply with the family. But if he accepts sannyas, then he becomes responsible for delivering the whole world. So for the greater responsibility, one accepts sannyas. Sannyasi doesn't mean just simply somebody who lays down and goes to sleep and eats and sleeps. No, sannyasi means somebody who has a mission, he's preaching, he's going everywhere, distributing the knowledge, distributing the wisdom, trying to enlighten people. And they're writing books, and they're preaching and accepting disciples, doing these things. So this is the higher responsibility. What do you think, ladies? Can you understand this?
Yes.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. But Guru Maharaj, but ladies have lot of family responsibilities. So till the end, they cannot. They have to internally renounce and work like that, right, Guru Maharaj? Or at the end, they can go to the Dham and do some service like that.
Yeah, well, a woman should always be protected. She's never given, she should not be independent, usually. When she's a young woman, she's protected by her father. Then when she's a married woman, she's protected by her husband. And then in old age, ideally should be a son there to protect the woman. Now, if the woman has no son, well, for some time, at least a husband is there. And together, they can go and visit holy places. You know, I said after Grihastha ashram, then there is the retired ashram, Vanaprastha. So, as Vanaprastha, husband and wife can be together. They go together and they can go to visit the holy places and they engage in spiritual practices, hearing and chanting and worshipping the deity. They do these things. This is how people prepare themselves for the next life. In this life, we have to prepare for the next life by proper practice, by worshipping the Lord and reading the scriptures and observing the different festivals like this Janmashtami coming. So these things. So the duties of the woman are there. But the woman is controlled also by the husband. If she goes with the husband goes to holy places, she'll go with him. But the woman doesn't take
Yes.
Internally, she's detached. I mean, she's not worried about the money. She's not thinking about money and about the bigger house and a new car. And she's not thinking about more grandchildren and getting the children married all the time. You know, she's surrendered more to Krishna. She lets Krishna take care of everything, these things. And her attention is more towards her spiritual practice. Of course, some responsibility is there, but she's not greatly worried about it. She knows Krishna will take care. Okay?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Nasato vityate bhavo, nabhavo vityasata, ubhayur apitrishtontas, tvanayos tatvadashibhir.
Translation. Nitya, do you want to read the translation?
Yes. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Purport. There is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of different cells in the admitted by modern medical science. And thus, growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between the matter and the spirit. By nature, the body is ever-changing and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of truth, both impersonalist and personalist. In the Vishnu Purana, it is 2.12.38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotisi Vishnu Bhuvanani Vishnuha. The word existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seeds of truth. Shall I continue for the next?
Okay, so we're hearing about the comparison between the material and the spiritual. The body is material and the soul is spiritual. So Prabhupada explains that both the personalist and the impersonalist, they agree, and that recognizing that the soul is eternal and spiritual. We don't have any argument there with them. They both agree. There's a difference between the body and the soul. The soul is eternal, it doesn't change, but the body changes. All the cells in the body change, all the different organs and parts of the body, they're changing. But the cell, that's always the same. So Prabhupada points out, this is the difference between the matter and spirit. Matter is changing, but the spirit is eternal, doesn't change. Okay, go ahead.
This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel of living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutra, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic, the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance. And to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches us the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of the living entities for all time.
Okay, so this is the comparison between the material and the spiritual. Prabhupada points out how the living entities are this energy. We're the energy of the Lord. And the material nature is also the energy of the Lord. But one is superior and one is inferior. The superior nature has consciousness. The inferior nature doesn't have consciousness. Just like the body, without a dead body, has no consciousness. Why is there no consciousness in the dead body? Because there's no soul there. When the soul leaves the body, then the body's dead. The body is matter. It's the soul which gives life to the body. So at the time of death, the soul leaves the body, and with the soul leaving the body, there's no more consciousness anymore in the body. So that consciousness coming from the soul, and that soul is the part of the Supreme Lord. We're tiny parts. He is the source, and we're the energy, and he's energetic. Right? We are the Prakriti, and he's the Purush. Just like in Hindi language, Purush is the male, and Prakriti means female. And so the man is meant to be in charge and responsible. He takes care for in the same way the Lord takes care of all of us. We are his Prakriti, we are his energy, and he's energetic. That's the relationship as described in the scriptures. Okay?
Avinashi tudam vidhi, yena sarvam idam tatam, vinsham avyayasyasyam, nakaschit kartum arhati.
So that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Purport: this verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of the body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10 part of the upper portion of the hair point in size. The Shetashwara Upanishad confirms this. Balagrashoto bhagasva satodha kalpitasya cha bhago jibo shobigyo shochanantayo kalpate. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Similarly, the same version is stated: Keshagrashato bhagasva shatangshu shodrishatok jivo shukha shuro oyohong shankhatito hi chitkan. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms, which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spiritual soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9, the measurement of the atomic soul spirit is further explained. Esho honuratta chetosha beditobbo jasmin prano panchoda sangbibesho pranoshchittong sarvamotong projanang jasmin vishuddhe vibhotesho atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vayana, samana, and udana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air, encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So the constitution of the atom soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is also actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to Mundaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. And because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart along with the super soul, and thus all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit whole are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental part of the Supreme Soul are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. So, whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body. And the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself.
Okay, so we can see this, the nature of this spiritual knowledge, how so much information is here in the Vedas. They give us the actual dimension of the soul. The actual size of the soul, very precise. We don't find any other scriptures where you get such a detailed information of the nature of the spirit soul. So understanding the depth of spiritual knowledge here in Bhagavad Gita should convince us to surrender to Krishna and to take up this process. Of course, people may challenge, they say, well, how do you know there's a soul? Nobody's ever seen this soul. But although we can't say that you can see the soul because the soul is spiritual, it's not material. That's the point, that to see something spiritual, you have to have spiritual vision. But although we cannot see the soul, we can see the effect of the soul. The effect of the soul is there in consciousness. And that's important to understand. Just like we may not see the sun, but we see the sunlight. We see the effects of the sun in the sunlight. So the same way, we may not see the soul, but we see the effect of the soul in consciousness. So we have to learn these different kind of arguments. Sometimes you present these things to people, they'll argue with you. Oh, I don't believe there's a soul. Nobody's seen the soul. I don't believe this. We have to be able to present these different conclusions to people. Because generally people today are atheistic. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in a soul. So we want to try to educate them. We want to try to give them a proper spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding. Okay, any questions?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. Where are people you have who have an artificial heart? Where is soul and Paramatma and Atman in this case?
Okay. The heart is like the seat of a car.
Okay.
Just like sometimes you do a heart transplant. What is a heart transplant? Heart transplant is taking out one seat and putting in a new seat, because the heart is the sitting place of the soul and the super soul. So if they put in a new heart or artificial heart, it's giving a new seat for the soul and for the Atma and the Paramatma. That's what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so then we can go on and chant Hare Krishna.
Yes,
Krishna.
Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. We can chant Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Okay.
Jai.
Bol.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Jai.
Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki.
Jai. Thank you, Guru.